You know, when you picture an aviation disaster, the image in your head is usually this sudden, terrifying, explosive moment.
Right, like an engine giving out or a gauge dropping suddenly.
Exactly. The mind goes straight to that one catastrophic second where everything just breaks apart. But what if the disaster didn't actually start in the sky at all?
That is the real question.
Right. What if it started weeks or even months earlier in a perfectly quiet room with a completely unremarkable, seemingly minor decision? Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is exploring a fascinating document titled What a DSL, or Designated Safeguarding Lead, Can Learn from an Air Crash Investigator.
And it is a brilliant comparison because it takes the meticulous systemic approach used to investigate aviation disasters and applies it to human safeguarding, child protection, and crisis prevention.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Because the crossover between aviation mechanics and, pastoral care or HR is it's unexpected, but it's terrifyingly accurate.
It really forces a complete perspective shift because an experienced air crash investigator knows the absolute second they walk onto a crash site that the shattered metal is just a final symptom.
The crash has already happened.
Exactly. The aircraft is down, the damage is visible, but the crash itself was never the true beginning of the disaster. And their purpose isn't revenge. They aren't there to just point a finger at the last person holding the control stick.
Right, they want to know how it happened so they can stop the next one.
Yes, their entire methodology is built on prevention, finding the invisible threads that led to that moment.
Which is why this is so relevant to you listening right now. Whether you are in education leadership, corporate management, or honestly just fascinated by how complex systems fail, this framework will completely change how you look at sudden crises.
Absolutely.
So, to understand how to prevent a crisis, we first have to dismantle the biggest myth about how crises actually happen. We tend to think of it like a silent line of falling dominoes.
That's a good way to put it.
But when a crisis hits, human nature dictates we immediately look for a scapegoat. The board, the media, the public, we all want the one person who messed up. Why is it so hard for organizations to accept that catastrophes are rarely caused by one isolated error?
What's fascinating here is human brains are just neurologically wired for simple narratives. Cause and effect, villain and victim. It is deeply uncomfortable to accept that the systems we rely on are vulnerable to minor cascading flaws.
So it's easier to just fire someone.
Much easier. It's easier to fire a bad apple than admit the barrel is rotting. But safeguarding failures, just like aviation disasters, are systemic long before they become personal. They don't emerge from a single bad decision.
They come from chains of events, right?
Right. Tiny events aligning in exactly the wrong sequence. In aviation, they talk about the Swiss cheese model. Every layer of defense has microscopic holes in it.
And usually those holes don't line up.
Exactly. But when they do line up perfectly, a catastrophe slips right through. And in human organizations, those holes look like repeated missed opportunities, like weak information sharing or delayed safeguarding recording.
Like someone thinking, oh, I'll log that behavioral change into the system tomorrow.
Yes, exactly that. Or staff assuming others have already acted.
Oh, like the bystander effect.
Sort of, but amplified by systemic overload.
Yeah.
If you CC 10 people on a concerning email, everyone assumes one of the other 9 people is handling it, and then you have escalation thresholds being inconsistently applied.
Where one manager thinks a comment is a red flag and another just calls it banter.
Precisely. Most serious failures begin quietly in these gray areas, long before the moment everyone finally notices.
Okay, but if disasters are chains of small events, what actually causes those individual links to break? I want to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Wait, aren't safeguarding and safety procedures supposed to be strictly rule-based and objective? Like you fill out a form, you follow a flowchart. How do subjective things like staff well-being actually cause a procedural system to fail?
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
you have to realize that safeguarding systems are human systems before they're procedural systems.
Right. Because humans are the ones running the flowcharts.
Exactly. An algorithm doesn't notice that a colleague is suddenly withdrawn. A human does. Aviation investigators don't just look at hydraulic fluid. They look at fatigue, cognitive overload, team dynamics.
Because an exhausted pilot makes mistakes.
Right. And in safeguarding, burnout, emotional exhaustion, and a lack of psychological safety sit right underneath these mistakes. When a teacher or a manager is operating at 110% capacity, suffering from intense decision fatigue, they only have the bandwidth to deal with the fires right in front of them.
So they miss the invisible red flags. They miss the smell of smoke.
Yes. They miss the low-level concerns, things that usually exist before a crisis becomes undeniable.
The source material gives some really chilling examples of this, actually.
It does. It talks about how informal discomfort is often normalized over time,
Like previous peer complaints just being ignored.
or harmful banter being tolerated, a colleague being emotionally withdrawn, and people just overlooking it, or even students trying to communicate indirectly, while earlier referrals are minimized by management.
Wow. So the warning signs are literally ringing, but people are too overwhelmed to hear them.
And that leads to a sociological concept called the normalization of deviance. If minor bad behavior happens daily without consequence, the brain just stops seeing it as a threat. The deviance becomes the new normal.
That is wild. Okay, but if the red flags and warning signs are clearly there, why do they remain ignored? Here's where it gets really interesting.
Let's hear it.
If an organizational culture is terrified of failing or terrified of being punished by an inspector or a board, doesn't that fear actually make staff more careful? Wouldn't they be hypervigilant?
This raises an important question. It's a logical assumption, but decades of aviation history prove it is entirely backward. Fear-based cultures actually hide risk instead of reducing it.
Wait, really? They hide it?
Yes. If the culture dictates that reporting a minor mistake will result in you being publicly shamed or fired, your survival instinct kicks in. You keep quiet.
You just bury the evidence and hope it goes away.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Silence and assumption are recurring contributors to failure. When hierarchy suppresses concern, teams stop communicating clearly. Aviation safety improved globally because investigations focused on system redesign and learning, not just punitive blame.
Oh, so they shifted away from just firing the guy who made a mistake?
Right. They implemented confidential reporting systems, and organizations need that exact same leadership shift.
Which means building psychologically safe cultures.
Yes, you need strong handover systems, multidisciplinary discussions. You have to encourage honest reflection without humiliation, and most importantly, treat near misses as intelligence rather than embarrassment.
A near miss. Meaning, we almost had a disaster, but we caught it at the last second.
Yes. In a fear-based culture, a near miss is an embarrassment. You sweep it under the rug. But in a high-reliability culture, a near miss is treated as high-value intelligence. It's the system showing you exactly where the gaps are without you having to pay the price of an actual disaster.
It's basically free data.
It's free data, but only if leadership swallows their pride to look at it.
Yeah.
Schools and organizations become safer when uncomfortable lessons are remembered and embedded structurally.
Like through case learning and reflective audits.
Exactly, rather than quietly buried. That is how you build organizational memory.
I love that. Organizational memory. But I think we also need to do the honest bit here, right? Because as powerful as this air crash investigator framework is for identifying systemic drift, there is a fundamental ethical difference between broken machinery and human lives.
Yeah, there's a massive difference, yes.
I mean, an air crash investigator is dealing with the aftermath of an event that has already concluded. They are dealing with metal and physics. The plane has already crashed.
Right, the event is over.
So how does a designated safeguarding lead's role differ from that in real time? Because they aren't just looking at a pile of wreckage.
This is the critical difference highlighted in the source text. A DSL is responding to living, evolving realities, not just conducting a retrospective analysis. Students or vulnerable employees are not disasters to analyze.
They are living people in the middle of a crisis.
Exactly. Safeguarding is not emotionally detached investigation work. You can't just pause a person's life while you analyze the data. It requires relational and pastoral leadership.
Which means you need the analytical rigor of an investigator, but the empathy of a caregiver.
Yes. You are providing human-centered educational care to protect students within the system, rather than pure technical analysis. If you only look at the system, you become cold and bureaucratic. But if you only focus on the immediate emotion, you miss the systemic gaps.
It's a really difficult balance to strike.
It is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
You have to maintain the vigilance of an investigator without ever losing the human warmth required for actual care.
So what does this all mean? For the person listening to this right now, how do they take this complex aviation analogy and apply it to their school, their HR department, or their team?
It comes down to this. Leadership requires the courage to examine systems honestly, to understand how harm became possible in the first place. You have to turn painful learning into stronger protection. So ask yourself, if a serious review happened in your setting tomorrow, what small decisions, silences, or cultural drifts would hindsight reveal?
Every ignored email and piece of harmful banter suddenly looks very different in hindsight.
It really does.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today. Building on this whole idea of treating near misses as
Oh,
intelligence,
this is a great point.
if you are looking at your own organization or team right now and you see absolutely zero reported near misses, zero minor low level concerns being flagged by your staff, is that actually proof of a perfectly safe environment? Or is the total absence of minor warnings actually the most terrifying red flag of all? The ultimate proof of a culture of silence where the chain of disaster is already quietly building.